here again with famous author Jeffrey Moore. And what are we doing? Last time we were talking about this Gerald Conte's letter.
We were, and this is part of a process in the invention we call read and react, where a lot of academics is you read somebody else's ideas and then you react to them and you write an essay based on your reactions. So we spent a bunch of time. You're my guinea pig here, and I appreciate you being the guinea pig. So we spent some time building up some ideas that you were having in reaction to the letter, and they're summarized here on the page. I'd love for you to just sort of read them out. And we, at the bottom half, we kind of formalized it, and then we're going to talk today about, well, where do you go from here?
This is very nice. Everyone should have a Jeffrey Moore to make a synopsis of their thoughts.
Which I believe is the function of the Khan Academy.
All right. So this is so these are some of the notes that you got from what I had said in the last video. Micromanaging and standardized testing can strangle the creativity of the great teacher. Yes, I did say that in the last video.
And you still believe that?
I've thought about it a little bit more. I definitely believe that micromanaging strangles the creativity of a great teacher. You know, if they tell you day by day what to do, your individual unit tests and homeworks are dictated by someone else, I think that definitely hurts that. The standardized testing, I've thought about it a little bit more. I mean, most of the standardized tests that I've seen, especially at the state level, the ones that, you know, to measure whether students are at grade level or whatever else, they are kind of a minimum bar. You know, it's not always obvious because the results aren't always great. But if you look at them, they are a minimum bar. And I think most great teachers would look at those as minimum bars. And so I don't know if it necessarily, you know, if great learning is happening, the kids are going to learn 100 different things, and they should also be able to meet the 5 things that get them past that minimal bar. So I don't know whether the standardized testing by itself strangles the creativity. I think the place where that could be the case is a situation where you have a great teacher in a tough environment where the kids are well behind grade level, and just then that minimum bar is no longer a minimum bar anymore. It could be a very difficult bar. And so what does that teacher do?
In fact, you're going to get to that, I think, in one of these coming points.
Okay, yeah. So let's look at the other ones. Whenever the public, be that a governor, a politician, or a superintendent, gets worried about the education system, the reaction is to place more constraints on it and make it more rigid. I still believe this.
By the way, that is a very cool point. I'd never thought about that. That is a really cool idea.
This might de-risk some of the worst classrooms, some of the ones that are really failing, where students are not getting even to a minimal level, but it has a horrible consequence of suppressing the very best teachers. I still believe this. I mean, this all goes back to, okay, you're worried, you're micromanaging. Micromanaging is bad. Yeah. It's kind of a march to mediocrity. I agree with that. If you tell the best teachers what to do hour by hour, they're not going to be the best teacher. The solution that they are placing on teachers like Gerald Conte is not the correct one. I believe that there are solutions that can bring up the standards of the worst performing schools without necessarily holding back the Gerald Contes of the world. I still think that, although I think it's not an easy a challenge. I think it would be more of their experiments that need to be tried to see if we can do this. And then, let's see, you wrote top-down, state-mandated curricula that have to be followed to a T, while they might help de-risk some of the worst-performing classrooms, have the negative impact of holding back the very best. And I did say that, I think.
Yeah, this was the thesis sentence we constructed where we were trying to say, if you had to just put it all into one sentence. So I guess my question would be here, you've had a week to think about this. How do you feel about this everything I'm going to say is somewhere represented in this sentence?
I agree. I definitely agree with the top-down state-mandated curricula, because this is much more about micromanaging than, I mean, you could have standardized testing without a top-down state-mandated curricula. You could tell a teacher, look, you do whatever you see as fit. You use whatever textbooks you want. You do whatever activities you want. But at the end of the year, we're going to just do a test to just make sure your kids are at some minimal bar. I don't think that is what I'm necessarily against. It's the do this week by week, do this hour by hour. You have to use this textbook. You have to use this test. You have to use these problem sets. So this is what I guess you wrote a synopsis of what I said.
Yeah, exactly.
I would write a little bit about the motivations of administrators and officials, why they're even thinking along these lines. That's all about the test scores and the number of kids that have to take remedial math. But then I would really focus in on how state mandates have to be followed to the letter. While they might help a classroom that is really broken, are definitely going to hold back more successful performing classrooms. And then I would write about alternate solutions that might be able to address the broken classrooms without breaking the non-broken ones. Yeah, I think this is. I still feel this way.
Okay, cool. So now we've got some invention that we think is pretty interesting, and we're going to apply some organizational exercises to it. Now, Sal and I've had a conversation offline. This isn't exactly the way he writes, but he's agreeing to play guinea pig with me to sort of walk through this system, because I think, in my experience in teaching freshman English, this is a way in which a lot of people have been able to come to terms with writing. Maybe they're not quite as gifted at it as some others. This is kind of fun. So what we're going to do is let's double click on any one of these ideas in red, either in the thesis sentence or in this paragraph below it, and we'll just start developing that one.
Okay. Well, I guess we'll start with a thesis sentence.
Okay. All right. So the first claim, we have two claims here, if you'll notice. One is these curricula might help de-risk some of the worst performing classrooms. So let's take that one. So that is now a subclaim. It's not a thesis sentence, but it's going to become a topic sentence, meaning it's part of the thesis that we're going to develop in a paragraph. So the topic sentence might say, something like, it is, state mandated curricula might help de-risk some of the worst performing classrooms. So that's a claim, right? Do you have any evidence for that claim? Why do you believe that?
Well, I don't have evidence, I guess, that would hold up in a court of law type of evidence. But, if I were to kind of imagine in my head a classroom where maybe the lectures that are being given aren't completely accurate, or they're not able to cover all of the material in the class, or and maybe it has absolutely nothing to do with the teacher. Maybe it's the students are acting up and it's disrupting some of the other students in the classroom. There I could see, look, if you have some, well, actually I would take that back. I mean, we're talking about state mandated curricula. Yeah, I mean, the issues that you're essentially trying to solve for is if there's a teacher that has bad judgment and is, even though this is math class, they have the students finger painting the whole time because they just think that'll help their, eventually help their mathematics. Then telling that teacher, no, look, you've got to use this textbook on October 5th. The students have to take this test. It's going to have these questions in it. Then on October 18th, you're going to have to make them do this. That could help de-risk that. I'm obviously talking about an extreme circumstance.
Now, what you did was interesting. So the claim, and we were looking at an extreme circumstance because this is not the core of our thesis. We're actually just trying to say the opposite of our thesis has some validity, and we're trying to just explore it briefly. But you didn't have, so we didn't have any data for that. Now, by the way, one of the wonderful things about the web these days is we probably could go on the web and find data. And I think, by the way, in college, you're increasingly expected to do that.
Yeah.
But for the moment during this talk, we're not going to do that.
Actually, that's interesting. I mean, so if I wanted to collect data, I would
Yeah.
probably do a search for something like testing, or not testing, state curricula improving test scores or improving outcomes, and I probably could find some state results that are doing that.
I think we're both very confident that kind of stuff would happen. So when you're writing an essay, I make a claim. I might so two paths. One path is I'll go to the web, I'll enter a search argument, and I will get some evidence for that claim. Increasingly, that is the standard expected in a college essay. But if you're writing the essay, say, on an exam, you're in the middle of an exam, you can't do that.
Right.
So, and sometimes it's not as a big enough point to do it. So then you give examples. And it was interesting to watch you construct your example, because you ended up saying, well, if there's problems in accuracy in the teacher's presentation of the material, if there's problems with coverage, they're not getting it covered, and then you went into the students acting up, and you thought, no, that's not part of the deal. So you took that one off, and then you said if they have the bad judgment to not do things. Those are all examples of when the claim would be true. And so all you're doing is we call it backing up the claim. Now let's back up a claim that you care more about. So I'm not sure whether that's the alternate solutions or the hold back more successful classrooms. I actually don't believe you. Oh yeah, micromanaging. Let's just do that. Micromanaging would hold back more successfully performing classrooms. So that's another topic sentence for another paragraph. So do you believe that? And why do you believe that?
I absolutely believe that. I mean, that's the teacher who's gone out and written their own exam that tests much deeper conceptual understanding than the one that comes from the publishing company. The teacher that has their students constructing proofs of things or exploring math at a much deeper level than is expected by the state tests. that teacher to tell them, no, you have to use the publisher's test. You have to do, you have to make these kids do 200 problems of busy work, as opposed to having these students try to do something creative or inventive. That's unfortunate. That's holding back everyone's experience.
Okay, so again, if you were listening to this, and we're going to kind of wrap this up with an idea here in just a second. Sal gave 3 different examples of how a micromanaged approach to testing would hold back a creative teacher. And so again, in the paragraph he was supporting this, he would be saying, he'd state his claim, and then he'd give those examples right one after another in sentences, just the way he did in conversation, and that would start to make up and organize the body of a paragraph. Now I want to close this with a model. I want you to do a little drawing for me, if you will. And this model is called the Toolman model, and you can look it up on the web, Toulmin. Toolman was a lawyer teaching other lawyers how to make arguments, and he's got a rather it's a complex model. We're going to look at it in another video in detail, but I just want to give you the simplified version of it. And it's basically just a line where you put claim on the right and you put evidence on the left. And the idea is, whenever you make a claim, you've got to link it to some evidence. Sometimes the evidence is data, sometimes the evidence is examples. So in a more scientific paper, you'd actually refer to test data, but in a more humanities-oriented paper, you'd probably refer to examples. Although you might refer back to a line in a poem, like Ozymandias, okay? Data and examples. And then the third part of the model, it's a little bar that goes down in the middle, he called the warrant, which is kind of a abstract term, but it's anything you would say to connect if the evidence, the connection between the evidence and the claim isn't obvious, you have to put an extra sentence in there saying, and here's why the evidence warrants me making this claim, and you, reader, believing in this claim. And so we use that model in the next video. We'll talk a little bit more about how you can use this model and a more complete version of this model to help structure paragraphs.
And just to kind of get a big picture of what's been going on here, because as your guinea pig, I want to understand what's happening. And I read this thing down here in the last video. You had me react to it essentially, and then you recorded as what I was reacting to, and then through that you were able to mine out my claims. And then the whole point of this one is we picked a couple of claims, and you had essentially me go through the exercise of coming up with the evidence and maybe the warrants too for a few of them. We didn't do all of them, but maybe now we're ready to start.
Exactly. And this is part of the transition in our Chevron model. We had one that said assess the writing situation, then do invention, then do organizing. This is the transition from invention to organizing.
I see.
So we're beginning to organize our thoughts.